Hello everybody, myself Dr. Ashok B. Surpur, Associate Professor, Department of Education, Karnataka State Akkamadevi Men's University, Vijaypura. Today we shall discuss learning second language in multilingual society. In that, let us see English in India. This is CTE course of IGNOU and it deals with how English has started in India as a language of learning. So here, English in India within its historical context, as we know the religious, economic and political reasons that underpin its continued importance in the subcontinent. So did the British administrators of the East India Company have the express aim of bringing English to India? That's a question always arise in our mind. What are the Anglicist Orientalist debate? What do you mean by the three language formula? And what is the status of English in India today? Has the standard declined? These are some questions that would like to find answer for these questions. English, though spoken by only 3%, is the associate official language. It is seen as a link language between linguistically disparate regions. As we know, it is the preferred medium of learning within our higher education institutions and in the field of science and technology. It is the only medium of instruction. Socially, it endows its speakers with a certain status and prestige. In short, despite the anti-English rhetoric that politicians indulge in from time to time, English continues to hold a dominant position. So, what is the historical background? On December 31st, 1600, Queen Elizabeth first granted a charter to a few merchants in London, giving them the monopoly of trading with India. This is how the East India Company came to establish its commerce and trade with this country. The Portuguese traders were already here and it was their language that was initially used. This was a kind of passage or jumble of Portuguese and Indian words. In fact, some of these words have entered the Hindi lexicon. We all know words such as achar, anas, ispat, istri, gozam, misrau, maize, etc. Portuguese commanded a dominant position which was gradually displaced by the English language. As British trade and political power increased, English began to gain ground in India. The advent of English, as we can see, is closely related to the European quest for the fabulous riches of the East. As Marlowe's Dr. Foster says, I will make them fly to India for gold, ransack the ocean for orient pearl. So it was initially for the sake of gold and orient pearl that the English came to India. The East India Company's charter was renewed in 1773 and the 43rd sections of the Charter Act of 1830 sanctioned a sum of not less than 1 lakh of rupees annually to be applied to the revival and improvement of literature and encouragement of the learned native. The question that comes up after reading this statement is whether it was the improvement of the native literature or was it to be English literature, and how would the native be considered learned? By the acquisition of Western education or by studying the native branches of knowledge. This ambivalence in the British designs gave rise to what is known as Anglicist Orientalist debate. In the beginning, the British administration encouraged native tongues by reviewing the languishing Hindi pathshalas and the Muslim madrasas. However, this did not seem to be the most suitable strategy to some renowned Indian scholars. They felt that English would serve no purpose beyond Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras, and for the millions of natives it would always remain an alien tongue. But this was not the view held uniformly by all Englishmen. Some, like John Sullivan, said on 28th February 1832 that the natives showed a very marked partiality to the English language, which should be spread by offering prizes and rewards. English education had the lure of a foothold in the bureaucracy, as is clear from the Court of Directors dispatch to the Governor General in Council dated 29th September 1830. It is stressed the importance of affording the native youth the means of cultivating the English language and literature, with assurance that diligent native would be granted every assistance and encouragement, pecuniary or otherwise, in the civil and judicial administration of India. The institutionalization of English. How this English has been made institutionalization. So here, in his famous minute in 1935, Macaulay outlined the basic reason underlying the introduction of Western education. We must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the million whom we govern. A class of persons Indian in blood and color, but English in tastes, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. And in order to do this, the Presidency Colleges were set up in Calcutta. So I repeat, In order to do this, the presidency colleges were set up in Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay. In Calcutta, the Hindu College, founded in 1817, was renamed as the Presidency College, by which name it is famous to this today. This happened after Wood's Educational Dispatch of 1854, drafted by Sir Charles Wood, President of the Select Committee of the British House of Commons. The highlights of this dispatch were the setting up of schools and colleges, as well as introducing a system of grant-in aid. There would be two-tier system of education, a higher and a lower. The English language is to be the medium of instruction in the higher branches and vernacular in the lower. So the higher English education will give a new basis of national unity, a better knowledge of own country, self-government, the government of India by the Indians in modified form. And now the question is, do we think English has fulfilled the role set out for it by the imperial masters? Has it really been a basis of national unity, or has it succeeded in dividing the nation into the classes and the masses? Whatever be the answer to these questions, the fact remains that the study of English has continued in the same way as when Lord Napier gave this address over a country ago, over a century ago in the country. Commenting on the role of English today, the report of the UGC curriculum development of English English first workshop of the undergraduate committee on 9 to 11 December 1986, run by the Central Institute of English and Foreign Language, Leeds, is very important to keep in mind. English is an important tool for the pursuit of studies at the undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Second one, it is important for effective functioning in a variety of professional and vocational careers. 3. It helps in the attainment of social equity and provides opportunities for better and fuller life. It promotes national integration by performing the role of a link language, and it is an important instrument for modernization and creation of intellectual and cultural awareness of the contemporary world. Now, once English was established and its position consolidated by institutional support and state patronage, it gathered a momentum of its own, so that even during the nationalist struggle, its position remained unchanged. And so English continued to exist alongside Vande Mataram and Quit India. What was the response to English in the exciting moment when India kept its trust and tryst with the destiny and shook off foreign domination? What about English after independence? It is interesting to note that on the occasion of independence, both Nehru and Jinnah addressed their notions in their speech on the both sides of the border in English, and the majority of the subcontinents populace, that's 80%, was rural based and unlikely to understand the language. They addressed their nations. Mahatma Gandhi believed that real education is impossible through a foreign medium. And at the time of independence, there was a move to adopt Hindi as the national language. However, the breed of Western educated bureaucrats and politicians pleaded for English to be given equal status temporarily. It was decided that English would continue to be the official language only till 1965. But in 1965, the Indian government, in the face of bloodshed in Madras and elsewhere, had to give assurance that English would continue as a working language for official purposes. The assurance has to be given specifically to the southern states which opposed and continue to oppose the imposition of Hindi. While there has been a demand for the continuance of English, there has been an equally strong demand for its abolition. For instance, there are significant institutional changes in the Indian educational system. With the introduction of, I mean, with the introduction as the 10 plus 2 system in a school, it has been introduced. English no longer remains compulsory through high schools to first degree, as students can opt out of English after class 10. Similarly, until 1979, English was the accepted medium for the Indian Civil Services exam conducted by the Union Public Service Commission. Now, candidates can choose to answer questions in any of the modern Indian languages. Even within the armed forces, the last bastion of the Raj, official orders are given in Hindi, written in Roman script, a unique phenomenon known as Roman Hindi. While there have been attempts to challenge the status of English from time to time, these attempts have at best been half-hearted and English continues to remain as strong as ever. So, what are the government policies in this regard? The report of the University Education Commission was published in 1950-51, headed by S. Radhakrishnan. The report committee comments on the role of English in India. English cannot continue to occupy the place of state language as in the past. The use of language as such divides the people into two nations, the few who govern and the many who are governed, the one unable to talk the language of the other and mutually comprehending. However, recognizing this problem, the Commission still recommends that English be studied in high schools and in the universities in order that we may keep in touch with the living stream of ever-growing knowledge. The UGC appointed the Kunjru Committee in 1955 and the report submitted in December 1957 recommend that the change from English to an Indian language as the medium of instruction at the university stage should not be hastened. It also recommended that even when a change in the medium of instruction is made, English should continue to be studied by all university students. It also recommends that it is in our educational interest that English should be retained as a properly studied second language in our universities, even when an Indian language is used as the ordinary medium of teaching. In February 1960, the UGC appointed a committee of experts with G.C. Banerjee as the chairman to examine the question of English teaching. This too came up with recommendations similar to the ones outlined in the earlier two reports. It is only in the 1960s that a breakthrough was achieved by the introduction of three language formula. The three language formula, as the Kothari Education Commission's report 1964 says that this triangle formula aimed at satisfying all societies of the population was placed before the people by the then Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri. However, we know that the formula has generally not been implemented and state governments focus on the issues of language only from within their own political agenda. The three language formula proposes the learning of three languages: Hindi, English, and a regional language. The Hindi belt is expected to learn a Dravidian language from the south. All states have not followed this formula, and the educational policy of each state is its own responsibility. Even so, English is taught as the main second language in each state. However, at what level English language teaching is introduced in schools differs not only in different states but also within different schools in the same state. Then what about the present position? What is the present position in the teaching of English? In India, English is the widely taught second language as practically all levels of education. All the Indian universities, graduate colleges and junior colleges have separate departments for the teaching of English. But unfortunately, in these departments, a majority of students get no serious exposure to English as a language. Their appreciation of the classics of English, often taught to a dazed class, is very superficial. The teachers are not trained at all in the basic method. I mean, the basic methodology of teaching languages or in teaching the structure of English. This has created a serious pedagogical and educational problems. So in fact, its importance is all the more enhanced with the inundation of the Indian home by foreign media. So that instead of trying to emulate the British received pronunciation, the young urban speaker of English in India is increasingly trying to follow the American model. So, what about the written standards? That's still a question of standard. In 1963, Jawaharlal Nehru had stated in an address delivered at the Central Institute of English, Hyderabad, if we are going to keep up English, we must try to keep up certain standards in English. So, the Central Institute of English, in fact, the Central Institute of English was set up in 1958 to arrest these falling standards, especially at the secondary stage of education. It is deemed necessary to take steps to improve the teaching of English both through organization of research in the teaching of this subject and the training of teachers in the most suitable techniques. So now the question is, for within such a diversity, whose use of language is standard and whose deviant? To sum up, is the words of Khosrow. At one end of spectrum, we have educated or standard in Indian English, and at the other end, we have kitchen English. Other varieties such as Babu English appear at various points on the spectrum. He has stated in 1983. It is a very specific statement. No, then what are the functions of English? English as the language of business, administration, the judiciary and the press. English is a link language providing means of communication for people from different linguistic regions. English as a medium of study when other subjects are studied through the medium of English. English as a subject of study wherein English language and literature are studied as a discipline. English as the language of the expressive culture of society. In our case, the result of this has been the dynamic body of Indian writing English. Now, as our discussion goes, categorically, it is very interesting that how the English has been taught in Indian context. A survey of the position of English in schools and colleges gives us a clear picture about how English has been taught in Indian schools and what are the planning of a teacher, how he plans to teach English. There is three language policy, mother tongue, and the linguistic reality of India, and above all, an English language teacher should come out with the challenges. So that's why, in some cases, it has been told that English teachers are at crossroads. The problems of language planning and language education are considerable in a multilingual society like India. A national language policy has to bring about national cohesiveness and create a national identity without, at the same time, displacing the original ethnic cultural identities of the component groups. So here, language planning and the English teacher, the close relation between the use of a language and political power, socio-economic development, national and local identity, and cultural values has led to the increasing realization of the importance of language policies and planning in the life of a nation. At the focal point in educational language planning is the teacher, since she is responsible for the successful application of curriculum and syllabus plans in the classroom. The teacher is also an outcome of the national policy in her training, attitudes and competences. Teachers are also instruments of higher levels of language planning that will affect future plans and proposals. Because of this link between national language planning and classroom practice, an understanding of language planning is very important for the teacher. What is the linguistic reality of India? Scholars, however, have found 1000 652 mother tongues linguistically an unsound statement. In the responses given to census workers, two trends have been detected. Number one, an anxiety to attain prestige by identifying oneself with a major language, and an inverted pride in exclusiveness and the anxiety to appear different, not to speak of the lure of benefits assured to linguistic minorities by the Constitution. Leaving aside dialects as being included within the languages, Grierson gives 179 languages and the census of 1920 only 188 languages. S.K. Chatterjee rounds it to 180 and further clarifies that of these 180 languages, some 130 are speeches mainly belonging to the Tibeto-Chinese and Austic groups of families, which are confined to either very small and generally backward primitive tribes in the northeastern frontier with no numerical, cultural and literary importance, or our language not belongs to India proper. So here, since members of the different linguistic groups have coexisted, coexisted and have interacted socially, economically, politically and culturally, bilingualism and trilingualism has been way of life. Growing urbanization and industrialization along with influence of modern education has given further boost to the process. There are good number of bilinguals and trilinguals even among the uneducated. Our socio-economic conditions are such that we need to know languages other than our mother tongue, and this is the goal of our language policy as portrayed in our constitution. So the three language policy, how it is implemented. In keeping with the multilingual reality of the country, a very liberal and flexible pattern has constantly been advocated. The claims of the mother tongue has always been acknowledged. The teaching of the official language, that is Hindi, and associate official language, that is English, are given due importance because they serve the function of communication with the larger out group, that is people outside the cultural group. The three language formula, which was suggested by the Central Advisory Board of Education and reviewed by the Chief Ministers in 1961, was further modified by the Education Commission that in 1964-66 and is in implementation in schools. So the three language formula has played a very important role in the Indian context. According to our national language policy for education, the teaching of mother tongue or regional language begins with class 1 and has to go up to class 10th. The second language can be either Hindi or English. The official language or the associate official language is taught compulsory from class 5th and class 10th, that is for 6 years. At this stage, a student can also offer Hindi or English as an optional language. In class 8th to 10th, All students are required to learn a third language compulsorily. Ideally, the third language chosen to the taught ought to be any one of the languages of the communities or groups in the neighboring states, so that interstate bonds can be strengthened. Practically speaking, it gives students the opportunity to learn English or Hindi, whichever is not covered by the second language. During these 3 years, a student can also study optionally one or more modern Indian languages. At the higher secondary stage, a student has to study compulsorily any two of the languages he or she has studied earlier, or any one modern Indian languages optionally, or any of the languages like modern Indian languages, classical languages, Indian or foreign, and modern foreign languages. The classical languages, both Indian and foreign, can only be optional after class 10th for 2 years. But the modern foreign languages can be studied for 5 years from class 8th if offered in lieu of Hindi and English. So, it should be noted here that although this revised graduated three language formula as recommended by the Education Commission has been accepted by the Government of India, it has not been informally implemented. It differs from place to place as per difference in the spread and distribution of the various linguistic communities and the language policies of the state governments. So, for our purposes, it may be more profitable to ignore the distinction of first, second, and third language and instead concentrate on the position of English, mother tongue, and other languages, since the former can be used to refer to any of the languages taught at the school, either as the medium of instruction or as one of the subjects in the curriculum. Accordingly, the position of the languages in Indian education institution will be mother tongue in Indian education, English in Indian education, and other languages. Let us take mother tongue in Indian education. The mother tongue is the proper medium of education was recognized by several of our national leaders such as Sri Aurobindo, Tagore, Gokhale, and Gandhi long before the first international support for the idea emerged at the UNESCO meeting of specialists held in 1953. At the lower primary level, the medium of education in our country has always been the mother tongue or the regional language. By the early 1940s, the regional languages was already the medium of large number of secondary schools. With the advent of freedom, this trend gained further momentum, and in quite a few states there is provision now to study up to the level of the first degree through regional medium. Some universities provide for the study of certain subjects through the mother tongue medium even at the postgraduate level. In fact, we are today far ahead of most other developing multilingual countries in using the mother tongue or the regional language as the medium of instruction. The situation is aggravated by the fact that the mother tongue is now being used as a weapon by different groups against different adversaries. For some, advocacy of the mother tongue is an effective countermove against the threatened Hindi domination. For some others, it is an effective weapon in the class struggle against the domination of the most English knowing elite. And some others have seized upon it as a strategy to be used in the power politics of regionalism. That the mother tongue sentiment should get exploited in these different ways is only natural in a democratic setup such as ours. But that such exploitation should blur our educational objectives is tragic. See, for example, in Indian context, the teaching of English is the weakest element. In several states, there is no obligation that students pass in English or grace marks are awarded liberally. Thus, the only immediate motivation most students have for studying any subject well is removed. The disastrous consequence of this ill-conceived liberalism can be easily seen in the English language teaching situation in many parts of our country today. It is true picture of the facts as they exist in a large majority of the cases. At the same time, it is equally true that attempts are underway to correct the system in many privately run small-scale schools and colleges. English in Indian education are more in today there are more English teachers. I mean how this English in Indian education has took place the place. More English students and more Indian English writers, a stronger English press and a powerful English media than when the British left the country. The masses do not show as much disenchantment with English or hostility towards it as is evident among a segment of the leadership. English medium schools are very much sought after by the social elite for their children. English is perhaps taught best when it is the medium of instruction. This explains why more and more people want English medium schooling for their children. English medium schools have become synonyms with good teaching, better discipline, accountability, etc. So the mushrooming of English medium schools is as much an indicator of the common man's desire for good teaching of English as of quality generation generally. So the most crucial positive fallout of this concern with English language teaching has been an increased awareness of uh, developments in the curriculum design. Members of boards of studies, curriculum framers, teachers and parents today are better informed about learner needs profile, instructional objectives, etc. English teachers are aware of the latest trends in language teaching. The trend today is increasingly moving towards practicing teachers and writing text to be used at their level. The CBSE interacts uh, texts. I repeat, the trend today is increasingly moving towards practicing teachers writing text to be used at their level. The CBSE interact texts, the Delhi University pass course texts, etc. and development in one language often affects others. So this is what the position of the English in Indian education. What about other languages? Of the 24 or more languages, the most commonly taught compulsory third language is Hindi, English and Sanskrit. In non-Hindi speaking states, Hindi is studied as the third language, while in Hindi speaking states, Hindi speaking students study Sanskrit. It may not be very useful for us to go into details about these courses. So, this is what the position in our Indian context regarding the position of language languages in especially Indian language, mother tongue, and other languages in the curriculum. Now, what is the power of the language? How this power motivates the child to learn the language? Most people, including many language experts, view language as a role-governed tool used for several units in the course of study. We'll also try to show how language results from a systematic pairing of words on the one hand and set of rules on the other. So this oftenly creates a very interesting fact that a linguist like Widdowson asks us to imagine three different contexts in which the sentences may be used. Number one, the door is closed but not bolted. You are sitting inside. Somebody knocks at the door and you say the door is open. And the second sentence, you are sitting with somebody in your office and that person suddenly misbehaves and you say the door is open. And in the third context, it is a cold night, everybody is closing in his or her quilt. Draught is coming from somewhere and you say the door is open. Now the question is how these three sentences have the same sentences in different contexts. Context A, sentence is the door is open, meaning please come in. And in the B, the door is open, you may leave. C, the door is open, will somebody get up and close the door? In each of these meanings, you will notice that language is being used for regulating some kind of social behavior. What is not so obvious here is that language is also very closely associated with power. These transactions are likely to involve friends or members of the family. Power relations obtaining. For example, between the master and the servant, ruler and the ruled, employer and the employed, etc., may not be so involved in such cases. This so-called standard language is used as an extremely effective and powerful asset in the unholy appropriation of the surplus produced by the poor people who are constantly denied any access to the standard variety. So now the question is, what is more important? The standard language is used as a legitimizing tool for perpetuating the status quo. Knowledge structures encoded in the standard language are the only ones that receives social approval. Local literacies are dismissed as substandard or as dialects and petkins. Now, what is standardization? The process of standardization of a particular variety itself clearly demonstrates the unholy nexus that exist between language and power in a given society. First of all, out of the several different varieties being used by people in a given geographical area, a variety exclusively associated with the rich and powerful is selected. This selection itself assures that all the related varieties which are linguistically as accurate, powerful, and poor come to be stigmatized as dialects of the standard variety. So it was the mist, I mean, it was the East Midlands variety and Caxton selected this variety for printing. If Caxton had chosen the West Midlands variety, Langland and not Chaucer would be known as the father of English poetry. The second process, the second step in the process of standardization is elaboration of functions of the selected variety. Nobody ever insists that the standard language should be used at home, in the street, or in the floor of a factory. As you would immediately appreciate, in multilingual societies such as that of India, selection of the standard extends not just across related varieties but across languages themselves. India has hundreds of languages. Of these, at least 10 or 12 are as rich and developed as any language of the world. Example: Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Hindi, Bengali, Gujarati, Marathi, Oriya, Punjabi, etc. But those in power in India have selected English to function as the passport to power and prosperity. They have also made sure that the access to fluency and accuracy in standard English will be restricted to their own children. Children of the poor masses must go to highly ill-equipped and understaffed government schools which produce laborers, semi-skilled and skilled workers, clerks, etc. It would appear that power mission of the society will come, that to keep in mind English, to a grinding halt without the elaboration of the functions of a standard language in important domains of activity. The third important step in the process of standardization is that of codification. Now the rules, spellings and words of the standard variety selected earlier are codified and enshrined in grammars, dictionaries and a whole range of reference books. All the features implicit in the process of selection and elaboration are now invoked to justify uniformity and codification. Correctness and purity became the defining features of a standard variety, and anything that deviates from it is stigmatized as incorrect, regional, substandard, or dialectal. So, teachers and educators often appeal to these codified, I mean, which are oftenly used in our discussion, that codified grammars and dictionaries to correct the languages of their pupils. In some cases, teachers are not even aware that what they are treating as mistakes have already been appropriated as acceptable forms by the elite in their revised grammars and dictionaries. In brief, through the process of selection, elaboration of functions and codification in grammars and dictionaries, the powerful and rich people in society create an additional instrument to perpetuate their power and to deny the powerless access to positions of power. Now, the question is how the language and power in the Indian classroom takes place. One of the most disastrous consequences of insisting on standard language being the only legitimate medium of education is to stigmatize and negate the multiplicity of languages children bring to the school. This is very, what do you say, the practical practice. Most classrooms are multilingual all over the world. Very few children in each class, however, speak the standard language at home. Generally, it is only these children who appropriate the benefits of education. In classroom transactions, it is only these children who actively participate in the learning process, while the majority speaking other varieties or languages remain silent witness. Power structures of society are reinforced while creativity of children in both their native and school languages stagnates. It is indeed ironical that although most classrooms are multilingual, our teacher training programs, teaching methods, and materials are so designed as if they were essentially monolingual. So here, those who in spite of learning or you say of the absence of adequate inputs manage to acquire fluency and advanced skills in their language still suffer ridicule and rejection as Hindi, Punjabi, etc. are not as potent tools to power as English is. So, language and power in society. The only association between language and power operates in society is in extremely subtle and complex ways. Very often, the sufferer may not even be aware that language is being used as a means of exploiting him or her. Sometimes, even some of those who wield power may not be aware of the contribution language makes to sustain their authority. So, this is about the power and the issues of language. This is how language is used to sell the products and demean the usage of language in the society. So we have seen how the language is used and how the different contexts are utilized to code the language. Language is thus not just a means of communication, nor is it just a question of systematically organizing a set of words into sentences. Language acquires meaning from the social context in which it is used. Since most of our social contexts are asymmetrical and hierarchically organized, language is often used to consolidate and sustain power. It is often used to deny the powerless access to power. As we have tried to show, language can be used as an extremely effective tool for influencing public opinion in such a way that the powerless do what those in power wish them to do. Hope you got the information about the standardization, power, and English education and rule of three language formula and language policy. And keep in mind all this information. Don't forget to wear the mask and maintain the social distance. And I request, don't forget to subscribe the channel. Please subscribe the channel and receive more lessons in near future. Thank you and all. Thank you.